This is a video about the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. We're recording it for several reasons. One is simply that I'm currently teaching a class on Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, and have been thinking about it recently. Thanks to the students in the class, by the way, for the discussions. Another reason is that I've been reading Nietzsche since I was a teenager. Nietzsche is probably the #1 philosopher for teenagers of the age of authenticity. And he's been hugely influential on me as on many others. But I somehow avoided writing about him. So I'm making up for this with this video. A third reason is that I feel that Nietzsche has been particularly misunderstood in the Anglo-American sphere. And I'm not only thinking about popular interpretations like Philosophy Tube or PewDiePie, but about analytic philosophers who describe Nietzsche with all kinds of isms and make a normative thinker out of him. This is even worse than the sovereign individual version of Nietzsche promoted by our friend Jordan Peterson. A fourth reason is that I believe Nietzsche's critique of morality has become very relevant again, not just in philosophy, but generally. He's a powerful antidote to the current civil religious revival, especially in academia. Nietzsche wrote books like others compose or play music. One of the best books on Nietzsche, written by Graham Parks, is nicely titled Composing the Soul. Nietzsche plays with various themes, like a musician. These themes complement one another, but sometimes they also contradict one another. There's a tension between different moods and keys. And if you don't get or don't like or ignore this musical style, it's useless to read it. I will talk about 7 overlapping and interconnected themes in Nietzsche. They're all taken from Beyond Good and Evil, but they can also be found in other writings. After outlining these themes, which are more or less randomly chosen from a much larger repertoire, I'll talk about 3 major contradictions within and between them. I don't think these contradictions make Nietzsche's work less valuable. To the contrary, they are part of his Redlichkeit, his integrity as a philosopher, who doesn't hide his ambiguity. The first theme is methodological. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche calls his method a Versuchen, a word that means to tempt or to seduce, as a devil or a lover does, and to attempt, or to try something out, as children do, and to experiment, as scientists do. Nietzsche combines the attitudes of a seductive devil, of a passionate lover, of a happy scientist, and of a playful child. At the end of Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche writes, "Oh, my written and painted thoughts! It was not long ago that you were still so colorful, young and malicious, so full of thorns and secret spices, that you made me sneeze and laugh. And now, you've already lost your novelty, and I'm afraid that some of you are ready to turn into truths. They already look so immortal, so pathetically decent and upright, so boring." Creations excite their creators in the beginning, but their half-life is short. Soon enough, they become stale and slightly embarrassing. I have such feelings about my books and videos as every redliche or honest content creator has. We know from experience that even and especially our normative attempts become pathetically decent and upright and boring. After a while they begin to smell, they stink. And what can we do then to avoid boredom? Another attempt, of course. A key metaphor related to Nietzsche's attempts is the mask. Philosophies are masks we try out. They're contingent, temporary personas we take on. Every philosophy conceals a philosophy too. Every opinion is also a hiding place. Every word is also a mask. The metaphor of the mask is related to what Paul D'Ambrosi and I call genuine pretending. What? The great man? I can only see an actor of his own ideal, Nietzsche writes. Building a strong sense of self and a strong identification with values is play acting turned seriously. Recognizing the play acting involved in all seriousness brings about laughter. I would go as far as to allow myself a rank order of philosophers based on the rank of their laughter, writes Nietzsche. And this is a laughter at the expense of everything serious. Another variation of the theme of tempting is Nietzsche's self-framing as a philosopher of the future. He writes, "True philosophers are commanders who first determine the where to and what for of people. But don't forget that such commands of where to and what for are experimental, not prescriptive." Werner Stegmaier, one of the most profound living Nietzscheans, reads Nietzsche as a philosopher of orientation, pointing out possible directions and perspectives if you're up for the seduction. Nietzsche's where to points not to, but beyond good and evil. This is a second big theme in his works, the critique of morality. All moral philosophy so far has been boring. Nothing has done more to spoil virtue for my ears than this tediousness of its advocates. As long as we're stuck in the moralist attitude, think of wokeism today, we remain lifeless and sick and lack actual virtue in the non-moral sense of vitality. One of the most hypocritical, boring, and lifeless moralists, according to Nietzsche, was Kant. Kant got trapped in the theoretical web he spun, like a spider, which is what Nietzsche called him in the Antichrist. Countless philosophers fly into such webs. Their blood is slowly but steadily sucked out of them. Normative webs appear as universal truth, but in reality, they are monstrous traps. Moralistic narratives decomplexify. They oversimplify life, narrowing it down to fictional principles that cover up the multitude of factors conditioning us. We are determined by a diversity of morals. Our actions shine with different colors in turn. They are rarely unambiguous. Nietzsche's critique of morality is closely connected with a third theme, genealogy. Genealogy, later taken up for instance by Foucault, is a historical outlook which, unlike Hegel's, is not idealistic, not focused primarily on spirit or ideas, but equally interested in biology and physiology and organic life. It looks for the genes of the past that condition us today. One example of a genealogical critique of morality is Nietzsche's analysis of the inherited herd instinct of obedience. For as long as there have been people, there have been a very large number of people who obeyed, compared to relatively few who command. So, considering the fact that humanity has been the best and most long-standing breeding ground for the cultivation of obedience so far, it's reasonable to suppose that the average person has an innate need to obey, is a type of formal conscience that commands, "Thou shalt." This need tries to satisfy itself and accepts whatever gets screamed into its ear by some commander or another, a parent, teacher, the law, class prejudice, public opinion. Nietzsche traces the sense of duty, very different from Kant, not back to reason, but to its presumable biological and sociological roots. It is an early form of evolutionary psychology. Especially enlightened and liberal modern Western morality is characterized by an inherited herd morality. This is in fact the situation in Europe today. I call it the moral hypocrisy of the commanders. They do not know how to protect themselves from their bad conscience, except by acting like executors of higher commands, or by borrowing herd maxims from the herd mentality, such as the first servants of the people. A fourth related theme is psychological deconstruction. Long before Derrida, Nietzsche was less interested in what philosophers explicitly talked about than in the paradoxes and pathologies their texts revealed. Nietzsche reads philosophers against the grain or in the mode of second-order observation. Here's an example of deconstructing Kant's ethics of duty. Many moralists, perhaps even Kant himself, want to make it clear through their morality that the worthy thing about me is that I can obey, and it should be the same for you as it is for me. In short, even morality is just a sign language of the affects. Morality is not only a sign language of the psychology of moralists, it's also an actual language. And this is a fifth major theme in Nietzsche: language and interpretation. Nietzsche says there are absolutely no moral phenomena, only a moral interpretation of the phenomena. Nietzsche died in the year 1900. He was part of the historical turn of the 19th century, as well as a predecessor of the linguistic turn of the 20th century. Already for Nietzsche, philosophy and ethics were language games. They create meaning in a reality that on its own has no meaning. Language expresses a will to make sense. And this is a sixth big theme: will. A few decades before Freud, Nietzsche proposed to regard our entire life of drives as the organization and outgrowth of one basic form of will, namely of the will to power, which is my claim. As a basic form of will, Nietzsche's will to power is not any particular will, but some sort of primal energy that evolved into all kinds of biological, psychological, and social powers. These wills are complex and contradictory. There are biologically grounded instincts. There are desires and feelings in our mind. There are political and religious movements in society. The entire life of drives indicates a seventh theme: life, or vitality. This theme is a red thread that runs through most of Nietzsche's attempts, experiments, and seductions. He critiques morality because it suppresses vitality. His genealogy traces biopower historically. As a psychologist, Nietzsche explores mental life forces. Language and interpretation are expressions of vitality too. Nietzsche is a transitional philosopher, not just between the historicist 19th century and a linguist 20th century, but on a much larger scale. He is a post-pre-Socratic and a pre-postmodernist, as Günter Wolff had said. Nietzsche is also contradictory. To conclude this video, I point to three contradictions, and these two are more or less randomly chosen among many others. First, Nietzsche emphatically denies free will. Very similar to contemporary scientists like Robert Sapolsky, he regards the idea that humans can be, or ought to be, in control of themselves and of society as fiction. We are conditioned by our biology, psychology, history, culture, language, and so on. But then Nietzsche also heavily employs the semantics of the age of authenticity. He emphasizes personal creativity and, similar to Max Stirner, uniqueness and ownership. Nietzsche's self-proclaimed pathos of distance often suggests some kind of individualism. Second, Nietzsche is clearly a philosopher of play and of laughter. But he also inherited the Enlightenment goal to make philosophy great again by making it scientific. He posed as a serious physiologist, psychologist, linguist, historian, and so on. As his book title, Die fröhliche Wissenschaft, gay or perhaps better, frolicking science, indicates, there's a tension between the pursuit of truth and its deconstruction. Third, Nietzsche often portrays himself as someone leading the way. He proclaims a philosophy for the future, for a new and more noble way of life. But then, with his pathos of distance, he makes it pretty clear that he doesn't want any followers. He doesn't pronounce any ideological or political program. These contradictions, too, show how Nietzsche zigzags between modernism and postmodernism. Sometimes go in here, sometimes go in there.